In today's video, I'm going to cover three things. First, I'm going to show where to download Visual Studio Code from and what are the extensions we need in Visual Studio Code for coding in Java. Then I'm going to introduce what is class and method. And then finally, I'm going to talk about primitive types in Java. So for downloading and installing Visual Studio Code, we can go to Google and type Visual Studio Code here. And this is going to take us to code.visualstudio.com. And from here, we can download either the Windows version or Mac version or Linux version based on which desktop you are using. And once downloaded and installed, we would need a couple of other things. So if we go here and again in Google, if we search Visual Studio Code for Java, the first link which will appear is Java in Visual Studio Code. And if you look into this, it suggests installing two packages for Visual Studio Code. First one is Code Pack for Java, and second one is Extension Pack for Java. And here in Visual Studio Code, I installed the extension pack for Java, and it came up with a bunch of things along with it. And if you do not know what is Visual Studio Code, it is an IDE. It is an extremely lightweight IDE created by Microsoft. It is completely free, and it is probably one of the most popular IDE for programming these days. And most of the people who use this JavaScript or Node.js or even Python, they end up using Visual Studio Code. And Visual Studio Code works in a folder format. So anytime you create a folder, it explores the folder and the files inside of it. So for the time being, I created a folder. It's called Hello World. And I have a hello world.java file in it. Right now it has couple of things, a class and a method. So the reason we need a class and a method is any program that we need to run in a Visual Studio Code which will compile into a bytecode of Java, which I explained in my last video, needs a class and method. So let's go back and first understand what is class and method. Then we'll come back and write here a very simple program. So what is class? Class is like a container of the code. It is a mechanism for organizing code inside of a program, which is responsible for executing some task. For example, if you want to create a program which will be responsible for calculating two numbers, or you want to create a program which is going to be a service which will return some data from some data source, irrespective of what you do, you need to have mechanism for organizing code. And Java is an object-oriented programming language, and class is its one of the primary construct. So class is how the code are organized, and it is a container of the code. A class is more like a blueprint. It does not run when the code is executed. Instead, the instance of a class is what gets executed during running of a program. For example, when a house is created, there is always a blueprint of the house. The blueprint itself is not the house, but using the blueprint, we can create multiple houses where people are going to live. Similarly, using a class, we can create multiple instances of the class, and they will run and execute the same functionality across those multiple objects. And apart from class, we need to also understand what is method, because that is also a fundamental construct, and that is something which will be needed for executing the code in Visual Studio Code IDE. IDE means Interactive Development Environment. So what is a method? The class itself does not contain any logic. Class consists of methods and variables. It is the method inside the class that contains the main logic code inside. Method is the main container of the code. It contains the logic for execution. Class is just a wrapper around all the method. And then if you want to execute any logic inside of a program, For example, if you need to execute 1 plus 1 or 5 plus 5 or any addition, you need to create a method for the addition, and you can invoke that method through an object. Once we get into the code, and in the subsequent videos we go through more functionalities and feature, it will be more clearer what is a method versus class. A method can take input data through parameters, and it can also return an output through return variables. Methods usually have access modifier for allowing where and who can access them, just like a class. So class and method both have access modifiers. Access modifiers are public, private, but I'm not going to discuss about access modifier right now because it will be a little bit confusing. In the subsequent videos, when it is time, I will discuss about access modifier, because at that point in time it will be much more clearer what are they. Now that we understand what is class and a method, here hello world is a class and the main is a method, and public is the access modifier, and here the class is nothing but an indicator of what it is. So public class hello world, it means that hello world is a type of class and it has a public access modifier, meaning it can be accessed from anywhere. Similarly, inside of that there is a public static void main. What is static is something I am going to explain later. But for the time being, what we need to understand is the entry point of any application inside of Java is always through a method called public static void main. This is a method which is the entry point, meaning the Java runtime is going to call this method during the execution. And if there is any code inside of method, that is what will be executed. And inside of that, then we can create variables, even instances of other classes, and call their methods. So this is the entry point. So this is what we need to understand right now, is that for running any code, the runtime needs a public static void main method. And the main method contains a string array as an argument. And void here is nothing but the return type, meaning this method is not returning anything. And the string array argument is nothing but the parameters to the method, meaning the incoming parameters of the method. Now what is string? String is a data type. Just like in the last video we saw the integer data type, similarly string is also a data type which represents a string. String can be a name, an address, a sentence, but that is what string is. It is a string type. Now first what we are going to do is, very fast thing, every time we learn a new programming language, the first thing we do is write a hello world. So I'm going to do the exact same thing. So what I'll do is I'll do system dot out dot println. System is a class part of java.lang namespace which contains a lot of useful method. So we're going to do system.out.println, and out is nothing but standard output stream object or print stream object which is exposed through this out, and then we'll call this println method on the print stream, which takes an array of character. An array of character and a string is the same thing. So here what we can do is we can do hello world. Now once we do that, next thing what we have to do is, now we wrote some code inside this class, inside of this method, and as I said, class does not contain the logic. Logic is usually inside methods or functions. So here we wrote the logic. Our logic for the time being is nothing but printing out hello world. Once we do that, now we have to compile this code. And after this code is compiled, it is going to create a hello world dot class. And once that is created, we can execute that. Now here you can see there's a hello world dot class already created because I compiled this code already. But let me show you how we can compile the code. For compiling the code, we have to use command javac, and then we can give the file name, which is helloworld.java, and we can run, and it is compiled. And then we can do java helloworld.java, and if we run here, you can see it printed out hello world. Now similarly, in my last video I have shown declaring variables and doing simple addition. So if we do the same thing here, we can declare int first is equal to 5 and int second is equal to 10. And then what we can do is we can do system.out.println, and here we can say first plus second. If we do that, after doing that, we need to again do javac and recreate the class file, and then we can run the Java. And this time if we run, you can see first it does the hello world, and after that it has printed 15, which is nothing but the output of the first and the second variables. Now when we declare variable, as I mentioned earlier, it is nothing but a placeholder for the actual value. Now both of these are going into the memory, and in memory, if the memory has some slot, in one of the slot the first will be added and it will be pointing to another memory location where 5 will be saved, and similarly second will be in another slot and 10 will be associated to that. When we discuss about garbage collection and memory management, we'll discuss a little bit more about how everything works internally. But for the time being, let's just understand whenever we declare any variable, it goes into the memory and then it is used from there. Now that we have written our fast class and fast main method, and we are able to execute code inside of the main method and able to print it out in a Visual Studio Code, we are set to get into next topics. But before that, first let's understand the basic data types or primitive data types which are needed for writing any Java code. In terms of primitive types in Java, it starts with byte, which is 8 bits in size, and then short, which is 16 bits in size, int, which is 32 bits in size, which we have just seen, long, which is 64 bits, and then float, which is 34 bits, but it's a floating point number, meaning it has decimal point. Similarly, double, which is nothing but 64 bit, but floating point number. And then we have character, which is 16 bit inside. And then finally we have boolean, which has one of two values, true or false. And then we have string. Now string data type is a non-primitive data type, but it is also a predefined data type in Java, meaning it, unlike class which we create, it is already created and it is available. And the string class represent character string. All string literals in Java, such as A, B, C inside of double quote, are implemented as instances of this class. So if we have to declare a string, we can always say string name equal to John Doe. So here we declared a string name, and then we can print this string out into output. So we can say name. Let me save the code. Now let's compile this. And now if I run this code, we should see John Doe after 15, and here we see John Doe after the 15. So this is all I wanted to cover for today's video. In my next video, I'll start with string. I will show some of the properties of string, how string concatenation works, And then I'm going to get into some logical programming like conditions. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. And if you are new to my channel, if you think you are getting value out of my channel, please subscribe to my channel. And thanks so much for watching this video.